Welcome to Build. I'm Laura Haywood. Today, I am thrilled to sit down with a man I can only describe using superlatives. He's one of the most hardworking people I've ever known, one of the greatest actors I've ever seen on stage, and one of the sweetest human beings I've ever been lucky enough to call my friend. We are about to get in deep with the man at the center of Broadway's blockbuster sensation, Hamilton, an American musical. It is with great pride that I welcome to the stage today, Mr. Michael Luwoye.
Goodness.
Watch out, because I am about to gush. I am so excited, first of all, to have you here. Second of all, to see you on stage playing Alexander Hamilton. We've been friends for several years. I met you when you were doing a play off-Broadway called Invisible Thread.
Yes.
You spotted me from the stage because I was sitting center of the third row bawling my eyes out. The cast invited me backstage, embraced me, and Michael and I have been friends ever since. You really, truly are one of the most genuine, loving, most talented people I've ever known. Nobody deserves this more than you.
Thank you. Goodness.
Let's talk about that journey. Actually, let's go back to earlier. You grew up in Alabama.
Yes.
Theater was not the path you thought you were going to be on.
Nowhere close.
What did you think you were going to do?
I thought that I would do something when I decided to actually pursue a career, I thought it would be something that had to do with composing, something that would eventually lead me to compose with Nintendo. But musical theater was not in the realm of possibilities at all for me as a career path. No.
And is it true that the reason that you ended up in theater is because the theater department offered you more scholarship money than the music department?
That's very correct. I got into the music department of the two schools that I had auditioned for, which were UAB, University of Alabama in Birmingham, and the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I got into the music department for both of them, but then I also got into the musical theater department for UA in Tuscaloosa, and they gave me a little bit more of a scholarship, so I took that money.
And you fell in love with acting.
Yeah.
Man, there are people who can sing and dance who get leading roles on Broadway, and some of them are great actors, and some of them are singers and dancers who, that's what they do. I have never seen somebody act a musical theater role like you are doing with Hamilton. The emotion with which you bring, especially Act Two, which is where the kind of sad, dark, personal stuff happens to Hamilton, it was all I could do not to jump up on the stage and go rescue my friend from this anguish he was in. Can you talk about putting yourself through the emotional journey that you have to do each night in this show?
I always say that Hamilton is a thick part and a thick piece in general, just the play itself. And the second act, to me, always requires that depth. I mean, for it to feel like something that you can empathize with from the audience, something that you can connect with. And for me, I always think that that journey is something that's borrowed. So it's not something that I have to take with me everywhere that I go to. So it's easy in that sense to get to the depths of that struggle, of the Hamilton struggle throughout the second act, and things that he built, watching those things fall apart and dealing with the paranoia while he's writing the Reynolds pamphlet and everything like that, and the fallout from that, his son dying and all of that, what that is when he's finally facing death, all of those heavy topics. For me, I collect experiences from people that I talk to every day, stories that I see on the news, personal things in my life, personal things from close friends and strangers, and I feel like that's all material to just ply from and work with. That's not something that I have to take with me off of the stage. So it's something that I feel like I can always it's a safe place to be able to explore all of those things on stage and then just be able to let go of it once I leave.
Do you have a recovery process? Do you have to go back into your dressing room? And I know there's vocal warm downs you can do. Are there emotional warm downs that you need to do? Or can you just
Now, I mean, with this part specifically, I've been doing it for a long time now. So I feel like it's just once we get off stage, I have a time where I warm up with it in the middle of the show. which is just like listening intensely while everything else is going on, to what other people that are on stage and off stage, what they're bringing. But once I'm off stage, especially after like Quiet Uptown or after the final duel, it's just something that just switched to the next thing.
You bring an incredible sense of gravity to all of those moments. And then when you have your funny moments, you are just like a ball of energy and light. I think my favorites are your Alexander has a couple of lines where he's mocking or outsmarting someone, and you throw in these dance moves. I'm trying to think of what they specifically are. Well, in the cabinet battles, for example, you throw in like whatever the hell it is you do in Monticello. You've got some dance moves there.
Yeah.
And I actually, Lexi Lawson, your Eliza, was here recently, and she told a story to me off stage about you are famous in those battle scenes because you improvised them to the nth degree. You were throwing in push-ups and other, like, can you talk about some of the things that you tried during those battle scenes that ended up getting,
Cut.
like, yeah, well, they got sort of turned down. Look, you got to turn it up to 11 before you can turn it back down to 10.
Yeah, the cabinet battles are always fun. Things that we would always test each other's limits anytime that we would go into them, whoever the Jefferson was that I was playing with that night. Because like when you're in a rap battle, like any rap battles that I watch, just like consume as a fan, or just like consumed while I was like studying and everything like that, you're really just trying to massacre your opponent, and in whatever way it is. And in the way that this is set up with this show, Hamilton wins that first one. So it's like whatever you can do to top whatever they would do. And my first stint on Broadway, the Jeffersons would do like a lot of high stake things, so I would have to top them in some way. There was one show where I did a burpee in the middle of it, which was...
Don't you have a handheld mic?
Yes.
Like, how do you do a burpee holding a mic? In fact, I mean...
No.
I couldn't resist.
I don't know if I can even do it now. It was one of those things that adrenaline just took over.
Yeah. Like, you didn't plan it? You just did it in the moment?
So that was the day that I did it. The day that I did it wasn't necessarily planned, but there was a time before that I was talking with our burr at the time, Brandon Victor Dixon, and he had told me, he bet me if I could do a burpee in the middle of the cabinet battle, and I couldn't do it that first night because my pants were too tight, and so I like went back to the drawing board and like loosened my suspenders a little bit for like weeks away, and then finally did it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That moment in the show, they really, when George Washington says, "Are you all ready for a cabinet battle?" There is something that is so inclusive about that moment that it does feel like you have the opportunity to show off for real.
Yeah.
There, and you're not doing burpees anymore, but you are still bringing, like, you're outdoing Jefferson in that moment.
As the parameters allow, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you got to push the limits to learn the limits.
Exactly.
You mentioned your first stint on Broadway. You are currently starring as the main Alexander Hamilton, the leading guy. You started as an alternate for Javier Munoz, who was the alternate when Lin-Manuel Miranda was in the role. And I think unique to you is the fact that you were covering both Hamilton and Burr at the same time. Do you know if any other actor has ever covered both roles?
There are other actors who are covering it, yes.
Now?
So, yes, now. I have that unique thing of being the only person to play them both in the same day, but there are multiple people who are covering both roles now.
Let's not gloss over that. He played Hamilton and Burr on the same day. Which one was the matinee and which one was the evening?
Hamilton matinee, Burr in the night.
And you knew that you were doing Hamilton, right? You had been preparing for that. But what was it the stage manager said to you? Do you have a Burr in you?
Yeah. Yeah. Our PSM, Amber White, asked me if I had a Burr for the night. And it was just one of those moments that's sort of like, how are you going to approach it? How are you actually going to do it? And then you just stop asking yourself questions and you just have to figure it out as you're doing it. And so I was like, yeah, why not? And we went in for it, and I'm sitting here today, so I survived it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it kills me that I didn't get to see you play Burr. If that weird twists of fate ever lead you to play Burr again, I want you to call me, and I'm going to break into the
That
theater.
would ever happen again.
Can you imagine?
I got 10 shots at it.
Do you have a Burr in you?
Not now. No.
What's really interesting to me is that you were originally seen for the Hercules Mulligan track.
Yes.
How did it change from when you first went into the audition room, which I believe was around the time the public cast was being put together? How did that arc happen that took you from a possible Hercules Mulligan James Madison to this guy?
I ask that question all the time because I really don't know what they saw in me in the casting room that made them believe that I could play Hamilton or Burr. I started out when it was off Broadway, did the Mulligan Madison track a couple times for different auditions while it was off Broadway, while it was on Broadway. And in between time, I was doing other projects and working on other things. And I got another call in for Mulligan Madison again. And then I got a call back that also added an audition for Mulligan Madison and Mulligan Madison and Lafayette Jefferson, and started to do that as well.
So you had to learn all these parts.
All the parts for the audition, get them down.
Did you learn Guns and Chips?
Yeah.
Do you still know it?
I know the show pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, do you want to give us Guns and Chips? I always want to hear everybody do those lines.
Everyone give it up for America's favorite fighting Frenchman. I'm taking this horse by the reins, making red coats sweated with blood stains. I'm never gonna stop until I make them drop, burn them up, scatter that remains. Watch me engaging them, escaping them, enraging them. Go to France for more funds, come back with more guns
and ships. And so the balance shifts. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate you letting me put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So you went in and learned those two double roles.
Yes.
And then at some point they said, can you also learn the two biggest parts in the show?
Yeah, my very, very, very last audition was for Hamilton and Burr. And I prepared for it and did that thing and was like, I thought that it was real. I genuinely thought that it was just an audition that was going to be for a later time. I was going to come back later on. They would see me do that, and then I would come back and maybe audition for either one of them individually a year later or something like that. I didn't know that they were making that decision that day that I was going to be the Hamilton alternate. So,
you and I went out for drinks very shortly after the announcement was made that you were going to be playing this role, but before you started, and you told me you told me the story about the day you found out about the casting.
Yes.
I love it because it's such a great reminder of the extremes to which actors in New York City have to go. Will you tell everybody about where you were, what you were doing when you found out that you landed the role of Hamilton on Broadway?
Yeah, so I actually went to the audition in my clothes. I was going to cater. I was a caterer at the time for Thomas Preddy Caterers, and I had a job that night. So my audition was at 3:00, and I had to start setting up for the event at Gotham Hall at 5. So I went in, did the audition in my setup clothes, and got to Gotham Hall, set up the event with my crew, and then I was getting into my tuxedo at the time, and I saw that I had a call on my phone from my agent, and I picked it up, and he had asked me so how's the audition? Because usually we check up on auditions and everything like that, and I told him that I thought that it was really good. I thought that I left enough of a mark that I could eventually be seen again for it and have a better foundation on what to do with it. And he was like, well, I hope that you're ready to play Hamilton on Broadway as the new alternate. And he had the speakerphone was on, so everybody in the office was cheering and everything, and I was still a little dumbfounded and confused and didn't know what was actually happening because that was a lot to take in for a small call. And I still had the event to do.
Yeah, that's my favorite part about the thing is that anybody else would have been like, screw you guys, I'm out of here. I just landed the biggest role in the biggest show on Broadway. And you were like, no, I made a commitment to cater this event. Yeah. Anybody want an hors d'oeuvre? And you couldn't tell anybody either, right? So
Well, yeah, I told the staff and everybody that was there, but like nobody on the floor that we were serving, like
Right.
nobody there. No,
Were
that
you
would've
just
been
thinking
weird.
every time, like, you don't know who you're taking this
I
canapé
was
from?
thinking, you don't know how many words I have to learn right now. Like that was the thing that was running through my head so much, because it was like learning for that audition, learning Hamilton. Like I was, as I usually am with anything that I try to do, learning something obsessive over it. And I was listening to the soundtrack literally from the moment that I woke up to when I went to sleep, let it play while I was going to sleep, and just kept going on and on and on to learn it all. But I learned the sides for the audition. I had no idea about the rest of the piece.
Right.
So there was so much more that I had to learn that I
Because when
needed
you
to
were
get down.
auditioning, there wasn't a cast album.
Well, there was at the time, but I wasn't. I just didn't focus on learning it as a
Right.
whole, because I didn't think that I would be cast in that role
Yeah.
at all. So I had like the mulligan wrap down, and I had everything from the sides from the auditions down, but the piece as a whole and the stamina that it would take to do it and all of those things were very underdeveloped.
So how does learning a project like that through the recording, how do I want to say this? Like, it seems to me that that would encourage you to do an imitation of Lin. I know from experience that you are not doing an imitation of Lin as Hamilton. Your Hamiltons feel very different to me, both brilliant. Did you have to unlearn some of what you learned from the cast album in order to make it your own, or did that just happen naturally?
Not really. When I remember having a conversation with my best friend about this, but when I started to learn the show, one of the things that I wanted to do was take in what it would be like for me to go into the show. What is that experience? Because I don't look like Lin, and I don't look like Javi. So when you see me first, there's like automatically a question of, what is this person gonna do? Who is this kid? What's he gonna do? Like that sort of thing. And for me, I when I was talking with my best friend, one of the things that we talked about was how I wanted to do something with the voice of like an arc, as the arc of the character. So I wanted there to be something where there's a difference between Act 1 and Act 2. There's a growth in there, but also I was pretty cognizant of the fact that even though you're seeing me and not really knowing what this person's gonna do, you've been listening to or imagining that the general audience has been listening to the album for such a long time. So you have the album in your ear. So for me, I wondered if there's any way that I could, in some parts of the show, emulate some things that Lin does. And so that it's like a little bit of a primer and a little bit of an introduction, so that it's not so foreign, and that it's an easy introduction and would allow for an easy transition into what my voice would sound like as well. That yes, you'll hear some things that are familiar, but eventually you're gonna hear a lot of things that are not familiar. And this is me, this is my offering, and it varies from what the cast album is. So it was intentional. There was intentional, like, there's intentional moments with the show of just like, this is something that I am like modeling after the cast album, but having to unlearn it, not necessarily. No.
Got it. When I was there the other night, specifically to study you, there were a few people in the first 3 rows who were like performing the show from their seats.
Living their whole life.
These are people, I think, who had won the $10 ticket lottery, which I think thousands and thousands of people enter every day. And yeah, it was like, this was the greatest thing that had ever happened or would ever happen to them. They were kids with a parent or an older brother and sister. And I could tell that they were having an energy exchange with the actors. Like, at one point, Thane Jasperson came out and at the beginning of Act 2 and did a fist bump with one of the kids. Yeah, it was in character.
Yeah.
I think he sits on the edge of the stage in that moment always, but he did the fist bump, and the kid jumped up and looked around like, did everybody just see that? What's the energy exchange like with the audience from day to day?
I mean, The thing about the Richard Rodgers is that it's such an intimate space that you can see a lot of people. So the moment that you catch eyes with somebody and they're engaged, like that added onto it is like, of course you're going to like try to connect with them in some way. In character, yes, but I mean, there's just certain points like that you might break a little character and like give them a little something. Or I know that there are parts of the show that I seek it out and see like who's mouthing the words or who's like bobbing to the beat or something like that, because that's the life force of the show. That's something that's feeding back to us. We feed you, you feed us. It's like, it's that reciprocal thing, that like energy exchange that's just beautiful about this piece, you know, and any piece really, but specifically with this, it's something that's, it's really something else.
It takes me back to the story I told when we first started about how at Invisible Thread, for which you were nominated for a Lortel Award, I should mention, that you know, that after the show, the cast was like, "Oh man, girl, you were crying," and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot. I can see them, and they can see me too." Yeah. But yeah, everyone who goes to see Hamilton is living their life in the best possible way, and you are no small part of that, sir. We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience.
Word.
Who's got one?
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Jen.
Nice shirt, Jen.
Thank you. My question has partly been answered by a burpee, but I was wondering, when you approach what is now such an iconic character as Hamilton, if you wanted to stick closer to Lin, and I know Javier Munoz plays it differently and everyone plays it differently, and you talked about how your voice is different, but are there other aspects of your personality that you try to put in there throughout the show, or what sort of differences will we see?
When it comes to just doing the show, I guess a perfect example of it is when I first watched the show. I didn't watch the show until I got into the show. So my first week of rehearsals, I was watching like most of the original cast. And I was sitting there and I saw Lin's show, and I had this immediate feeling that was like, I can't do that. Not necessarily like I can't perform at that level or anything like that, but there's a specific type of individuality that each of these people that are on stage, they can bring something to the role that I can't do. Which, if I had come to that realization years ago, that would have been something that would have been discouraging. But being inside of the show at the moment, I was like, that's an advantage. I can't do what they can do, but they can't do what I can do as well. So there's a lot of, at least for me, a lot of individual things that I bring to the show that is nothing like any other Hamilton. Every Hamilton that I've seen has some individual aspect to it. And I've lived my life. I know how I consume content and like exchange with people, so I know that that's very much going to tailor how I express through this character. That's different from anybody else who's ever done it.
Is there a specific beat you can point to that you're like, this is mine, this one's mine?
Just the end of my shot, I would say. Just what I feel like I do with my shot is just the whole journey for me feels like it's an individual thing for me. So
cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of your first week of rehearsal, I think we must mention the fact that you went on with only one rehearsal, with one put-in rehearsal with other cast members, and then Javi was out sick, and they were like, "Oh, you weren't going to go until next week, but you're going on as Alexander Hamilton tonight. Good luck." And you dominated it.
That was fun too. Yeah, that was a thing.
I bet it's especially fun after the fact.
Yeah, because I mean, again, like I don't remember a lot of that show, but it was. I went on. I had my put-in was that afternoon. We did it, and then I went on that night, and then it had 2 shows the next day. So yeah.
Wow. You're a superstar. You're a superhero, rock star. Who else has a question?
I was wondering, what was the funniest mistake that you made on stage?
Couple close saves. I'll start with close saves. One was on tour. I was going in this very like serious scene with Philip, and it's like, come back home when you're done, take my guns and everything like that. And I grabbed the guns and they slipped out of my hands, and I was just like tossing them throughout the thing, and like, come back home when you're done. And I caught them right before that moment and handed them to him. So that was one thing. There are a couple moments in There was one time at the end of One Last Time, the long speech, and I'd had a couple close calls, but this one was just terrible. I started it out, though, interviewing the incidents of my administration.
And those are George Washington's actual words, so you can't add them.
There's nothing that can save you, and I'm on the turntable and I'm just writing it. Just like nothing's happening, no words come out, and I just like right at the last second remembered like the next parts of it that he starts to echo. So yeah. Other than that, and just like tongue twisters or like biting my lip or something like that in the middle of like a long, quick phrase, yeah.
Live theater, wow.
Live theater.
Yeah.
I gotta love it.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm here from Washington, D.C. This is my daughter, Aliska. She's seen the show about 7 times. She fell in love with the show Hamilton, and so she has me coming up here like twice a month. But basically, I wanted to ask you, I really admire how you are able to play one character, but what does it take for you to play multiple? I mean, you've got to be brilliant. So, and how do you make that transition to remember all those lines and then to know which character you're playing?
It helps that there are different costumes, for starters. It's one thing that's integral to me to do that is what the internal map is, like what the different makeup is internal, what the thoughts are and everything like that. We all have bodies, but we all think different things. We've had educations in different ways. We've been exposed to different stimulus and everything like that, and that causes us all to be different people. So to approach a character in the same way and to start to think about what their intentions would be in the same moment. If we both went to a buffet and we were standing in front of a buffet, what are our tastes? We're not necessarily going to pick the same thing, so we have different tastes, so that makes 2 different pathways towards how we're going to choose food on that buffet. Same thing necessarily applies to like a different character. If you're starting with a character, you're starting with one man, this one man is going to make different choices than this other man is going to. So it's just really about how to distill and choose what those variations are between the 2 different people or multiple people that you're playing.
You know, now I have to ask, what would Hamilton and Burr order at the buffet?
Gosh. I think that there will just be a peaceful meal with chicken. Let's just say that.
So they were going to order the same thing? They're going to get the same thing after all that?
After all that stuff, I mean, there were guns that happened. It was just like, let's just
okay, got it. Yeah. Michael Luwoye, it has been a true honor to have you here. I wish that we could encourage people to go buy tickets to Hamilton. I will say, go to the website and sign up so that you get alerts of when the next block of tickets will go on sale. And enter the lottery on the Hamilton app. It's super easy. It'll even remind you when each lottery is open, so you can remember to enter. And I think now you even have a day's notice. So if you do live in Washington, D.C., and you win the lottery, you have time to get up here and get in that front row seat.
Funny story. The other day, I think this was last week, I was at the stage door talking to this mother and daughter, and they told me that they got their lottery alert that they won, and they're from Vancouver. So they took a red eye just to go see the show.
I mean, so I would too.
Anything's possible.
Yeah. Anything's possible. What a perfect way to end the interview. Thank you so much, Michael. Congratulations.
So much for having me.
It's been wonderful to have you here.